3 days after capturing the president of Venezuela from his own bedroom in Caracas. The same unit that executed that operation reportedly repositioned to the Iraq-Iran border. On January 3rd of 2026, Delta Force operators extracted Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores from a fortified compound in a mission codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, loading them onto helicopters and transferring them to the USS Iwo Jima before the Venezuelan military could even mount a response. By January 8th, according to multiple regional intelligence reports, selected units of that same Tier 1 Special Missions Unit had been deployed to temporary American military bases in Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces, approximately 450 kilometers from Tehran, on direct orders from President Trump. Their status, forward alert, meaning ready to launch operations at any moment against any target. The deployment of Delta Force to the Iranian border was not an isolated tactical decision. It was one component of the most comprehensive American military buildup in the Middle East since the June 2025 strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, a mobilization that ultimately involved an aircraft carrier strike group, multiple destroyer squadrons, fighter jet deployments, missile defense batteries, reconnaissance aircraft, and now the most secretive and lethal ground force in the American military arsenal. And it all happened while Iran was drowning in the blood of its own citizens, with security forces massacring thousands of protesters on the direct orders of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who told his commanders to crush the protests by any means necessary and show no mercy. To understand what Delta Force operators sitting 450 kilometers from Tehran means in operational terms, you need to understand what this unit is and what it has done. Formerly designated as the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, also known as the Combat Applications Group, Task Force Green, or simply the unit, Delta Force is the Army's premier Tier 1 Special Missions Unit, operating under the Joint Special Operations Command. Its operators are recruited primarily from the Rangers and Green Berets, subjected to a selection process with a failure rate exceeding 90%, and trained in capabilities that include hostage rescue, direct action raids, special reconnaissance, counterterrorism, and the capture or elimination of high-value targets in denied environments anywhere on Earth with minimal notice and total operational secrecy. Delta Force's operational history reads like a classified encyclopedia of American power projection. In 1980, it was created specifically for the Iranian hostage crisis, leading Operation Eagle Claw, the failed rescue attempt that killed 8 operators at Desert One and led directly to the creation of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, who would become Delta's dedicated helicopter force. In 1989, operators executed Operation Acid Gambit in Panama, rescuing hostage Kurt Muse from Modelo prison. During Desert Storm in 1991, Delta snipers located 26 Iraqi SQD missiles aimed at Israel in western Iraq and destroyed them with 50 caliber rifles from 3,000 yards, preventing Saddam Hussein's last gasp attempt to draw Israel into the war and fracture the Arab coalition. In 2003, Delta was the first American unit to enter western Iraq during the invasion, contributing to the capture of the Haditha Dam and playing decisive roles in the battles of Fallujah and Ramadi. By 2009, the unit had suffered a 20% casualty rate in Iraq, with 50% of its deployed operators receiving Purple Hearts. In December 2003, Delta executed Operation Red Dawn, capturing Saddam Hussein from a spider hole near Tikrit. In October 2019, they conducted Operation Kayla Mola in Syria, cornering ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in his compound and forcing him to detonate his own suicide vest rather than face capture. And on January 3rd of 2026, they snatched a sitting president from his bedroom in Caracas. Now, this same unit was reportedly positioned within striking distance of Tehran. The implications were not lost on Iranian intelligence. Delta Force's deployment is never routine. They are assigned exclusively to high-risk, high-value missions where plausible deniability is essential and where conventional forces cannot operate effectively. Their presence near the Iranian border, combined with the massive naval buildup in the Persian Gulf and the deployment of dozens of fighter aircraft to regional bases, created a military posture that could support anything from targeted leadership strikes to hostage rescue operations to reconnaissance missions deep inside Iranian territory. Iranian Army Commander-in-Chief General Abdolrahim Musavi warned that Iran had shifted its military doctrine toward an offensive posture and was prepared to deliver vengeful blows against the American military and its allies. The naval dimension of the buildup was equally staggering. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier stretching 333 meters and carrying over 65 aircraft, including F-15E Super Hornet fighters, F-35C Lightning II stealth jets, E-2D Hawkeye surveillance planes, and electronic warfare platforms, was diverted from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf on Trump's direct orders. The carrier brought a crew of 5,680 and was accompanied by 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., the USS Spruance, and the USS Michael Murphy, each equipped with long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of striking targets deep inside Iranian territory from hundreds of miles offshore. But the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group was only the vanguard. The guided missile destroyers USS McFall and USS Mitchell were already positioned near the Strait of Hormuz when the carrier arrived. The USS Delbert D. Black operated in the broader Central Command area. The USS Bulkley and USS Roosevelt patrolled the eastern Mediterranean, providing additional strike and defense capability from the west. 3 littoral combat ships, the USS Santa Barbara, USS Canberra, and USS Tulsa, were stationed at the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, equipped with mine countermeasure packages that would be critical if Iran attempted to mine the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which more than 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits. The air buildup matched the naval escalation in both scale and sophistication. Approximately 35 F-15E Strike Eagles from the 494th Fighter Squadron deployed to Jordan, the same unit that had used AIM-9 Sidewinder and AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles to destroy over 80 Iranian drones during Iran's April 2024 attack on Israel. KC-135 tanker aircraft surged to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, CENTCOM's forward headquarters and the largest American military installation in the Middle East, hosting approximately 10,000 personnel. In a single day, at least 8 tankers crossed the Atlantic to Moron Air Base in Spain, supporting at least 7 additional fighter-sized aircraft on the transatlantic crossing, with communications referencing an F-35 operations center. RC-135 reconnaissance planes arrived in the region, aircraft capable of detecting radioactive debris from nuclear activities and intercepting electromagnetic signals, a capability directly relevant to monitoring Iran's remaining nuclear infrastructure. Surveillance flights by American drones and manned reconnaissance aircraft operated at near constant pace from bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and beyond, maintaining around-the-clock coverage of the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian military installations, and the IRGC's missile launch sites. Additional terminal high-altitude area defense systems and Patriot missile batteries were deployed to Al Udeid, visible in satellite imagery captured by Planet Labs on January 25th, providing critical defense against the Iranian ballistic missile threat that had already proven real when Tehran struck Al Udeid during the June 2025 war, damaging a radome with a direct hit. The precedent of June 2025 loomed over every element of this buildup during Israel's 12-day war with Iran that summer. The United States had joined the conflict by launching approximately 30 Tomahawk missiles from submarines and conducting B-2 stealth bomber strikes against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, including Fordow, significantly damaging or destroying enrichment infrastructure. A total of 125 American aircraft were involved in the operation. F-35 and F-22 fighter jets had even breached Iranian airspace in anticipation of retaliatory strikes. Iran responded with an unprecedented ballistic missile strike on Al Udeid, and in January 2026, as tensions escalated again, a partial evacuation of the base was ordered, with hundreds of personnel relocated and 6 KC-135 tankers departing in a single evening. The ground force component extended well beyond Delta Force. The 82nd Airborne Division, America's immediate response force, stationed at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty in North Carolina, has been the military's go-to rapid deployment unit for Middle East crises involving Iran since at least 2020, when approximately 3,500 paratroopers deployed to Kuwait within 18 hours of receiving orders after Iranian-backed militia fighters assaulted the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. The division's deployment model, the immediate response force, emphasizes joint forcible entry operations and airborne assaults into denied environments, exactly the kind of contested airspace that Iran's air defense systems and electronic warfare capabilities would create in any conflict scenario involving American ground forces operating near or inside Iranian territory. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, provides the critical aviation link between Delta Force operators on the ground and their objectives. Created specifically after the Eagle Claw disaster in Iran in 1980, the Night Stalkers fly modified MH-60 Black Hawks, MH-47 Chinooks, and MH-6 Little Birds in conditions that no conventional aviation unit can operate in, including zero visibility, nighttime infiltrations into heavily defended airspace. Every Delta Force operation of the past 4 decades, from Mogadishu to Tikrit to Abbottabad to Caracas, has depended on Night Stalker pilots who train to fly at extreme low altitude using terrain-following radar, night vision, and infrared systems that turn darkness from an obstacle into their greatest tactical advantage against enemy air defenses. The strategic context of this military buildup cannot be separated from what was happening inside Iran. Between January 8th and 9th of 2026, Iranian security forces carried out massacres that killed an estimated 30,000 people in the first 48 hours alone, according to internal Ministry of Health estimates. The human rights activist news agency documented 6,941 confirmed deaths as of early February, with 11,630 additional cases under review. Over 42,000 people were arrested. The leaked NCRI documents revealed that the massacre was pre-planned, with the Supreme National Security Council developing the suppression strategy after the 2019 protests, mapping sniper positions, conducting psychological training to prepare soldiers to kill, and planning internet shutdowns to isolate protesters from the outside world. Trump's response escalated in phases that tracked the rising death toll. First, on January 5th, he posted that he had cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops, adding help is on the way. Then, as the massacre unfolded on January 8th and 9th, Delta Force reportedly moved to the Iraqi border. By January 16th, Trump claimed Iran had stopped killing protesters, though this was unverifiable given the internet blackout on January 23rd. Speaking aboard Air Force One returning from Davos, he announced the massive Armada heading to the Gulf, describing it as a larger fleet than the one sent against Venezuela. He added that maybe they would not have to use it, but the forces were positioned just in case and ready to fulfill their mission with speed and violence if necessary. Iran's military response was defiant and increasingly aggressive. IRGC political deputy Yadola Javani announced the test launch of a Khorramshahr 4 ballistic missile from a mobile launcher extracted from an underground facility, declaring that although Iran sat at the negotiating table, it would not surrender its military power. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that Iran's armed forces had their fingers on the trigger and would immediately and powerfully respond to any aggression. The RGC's Central Qatam al-Anbiya Command warned that if America attacked, they would wreak havoc on countries in the region that supported the Americans. Iran's UN mission posted that if pushed, Iran would defend itself and respond like never before. The rhetoric on both sides had reached a level of intensity not seen since the hours before the June 2025 strikes. The crisis atmosphere disrupted the entire region. International airlines, including Air France, Turkish Airlines, Pegasus, A-Jet, Indigo, and Air India, cancelled or rerouted flights through Iranian airspace. Shipping in the Persian Gulf dipped sharply as cargo and tanker companies reassessed the risks of operating near Iranian waters, sending insurance premiums for Strait of Hormuz transits skyrocketing. Gold prices surged above $5,000 per ounce after reports emerged of an Iranian drone being shot down by American forces. At least the Middle Eastern governments reached out to the White House at the highest levels, urging Washington not to abandon diplomacy, fearing that a military confrontation would spiral into a regional conflagration dwarfing anything witnessed during the June war. The Venezuelan precedent haunted Tehran's calculations. On January 3rd, Delta Force had entered Caracas, extracted a sitting president from his fortified compound, loaded him onto a helicopter, transferred him to a Navy warship, and delivered him to American custody. The entire operation, from breach to extraction, was executed with such precision that the Venezuelan military could not mount an organized response. Iranian leaders understood that if the same unit was now positioned 450 kilometers from Tehran, the implicit message was unmistakable. What happened to Maduro could happen to Khamenei. CNN's analysis described Trump's actions as a new form of American imperialism, noting that the Delta Force operation against Venezuela, combined with threats against Iran, Colombia, Mexico, Greenland, and Cuba, represented the broadest assertion of American military power since the post-September 11th era. The Foreign Policy Research Institute's analysis was more surgical in its assessment. Trump was reaching for the special operations panacea, the belief that elite units like Delta Force could achieve strategic objectives through surgical strikes without the political cost of full-scale war. The Maduro capture had reinforced this belief, but Iran, with its 90 million people, extensive ballistic missile arsenal, network of regional proxies, sophisticated air defense systems, rugged terrain, and 12 air, land, and sea borders, presented a fundamentally different challenge than a 29 million-person nation in the Caribbean with a demoralized military. As one Iranian analyst noted, Iran needs someone who understands the country, acknowledging that even regime change would require navigating a political and social complexity that no special operations raid could resolve on its own. The diplomatic track, meanwhile, remained barely alive. After 9 Middle Eastern governments lobbied Washington intensely, indirect talks were arranged in Muscat, Oman for February 6th. The American delegation was led by Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and included Jared Kushner, and in a remarkable first, CENTCOM commander Admiral Brad Cooper in full-dress uniform, whose presence at the diplomatic table served as a physical reminder that the Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group, the destroyers, the fighter jets, and presumably Delta Force operators sat just beyond the horizon, ready to execute whatever orders might follow if diplomacy failed to produce results satisfactory to the president, who had already demonstrated his willingness to use special operations forces against a sovereign nation's leader. The talks in Oman were indirect, mediated by Omani Foreign Minister Saeed Badr al-Busaidi. With neither side meeting face-to-face, Iran insisted on discussing only nuclear issues, rejecting the broader agenda Washington wanted, covering ballistic missiles and the protest crackdown. The key impasse remained Iran's demand to retain enrichment rights versus Trump's position of zero nuclear capability. Arakchi presented a preliminary plan, and both sides described the exchange as positive and a good start, agreeing to continue negotiations. But even as diplomatic words flowed in Muscat, Washington rolled out new sanctions on Iranian oil and 14 vessels the same day, and Trump told reporters the talks were very good while maintaining that all military options remained fully on the table. The military infrastructure assembled around Iran by early February 2026 represented the most complete American force projection package since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with over 65 combat aircraft, at least 10 guided missile destroyers and littoral combat ships, 35 or more F-15E Strike Eagles, F-35C Lightning IIs, KC-135 aerial refueling tankers, RC-135 reconnaissance platforms, THAAD and Patriot missile defense batteries, near-constant drone and manned surveillance coverage, and somewhere in the Iraqi provinces of Diyala and Wasit. Within helicopter range of Tehran, Tier 1 Special Operations Forces, whose last confirmed mission had been removing a head of state from power in a sovereign nation less than a week before they repositioned to the Iranian frontier. For decades, the 82nd Airborne Division has maintained the 18-hour deployment standard, from the alert notification to wheels up at Pope Army Airfield. Paratroopers must be airborne and heading to wherever the crisis demands within 18 hours. This is why they exist, the division declared during their last major Middle East deployment. In January 2020, when Iranian-backed militias attacked the Baghdad embassy, 750 paratroopers were airborne within hours, with 3,500 more following within days. The division's immediate response force model, redesigned specifically for contested environments like Iran's air defense network, integrates cyber capabilities, joint fires coordination, and forcible entry planning into the deployment framework. If Trump ordered a ground component to the Iran operation, the 82nd would be the first conventional force to receive the call. The question that analysts, allies, and adversaries alike were asking by early February was whether this massive military buildup was coercive diplomacy or pre-positioned capability for imminent action. The ambiguity was itself strategic. As one intelligence analyst told The Hill, the objectives remained intentionally ambiguous, keeping a wider range of possibilities and retaliatory scenarios under consideration and forcing Tehran to prepare for everything simultaneously while knowing it could defend against nothing with certainty. The national interest warned that a clash could spiral through multiple domains: strikes on nuclear sites, maritime disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, proxy attacks on U.S. bases, and potential strikes on Karg Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal, which Iranian parliamentarians themselves had identified as a vulnerability. The Iranian people trapped between a regime that had massacred thousands of its own citizens and a foreign power projecting overwhelming military force at their borders faced the most dangerous moment in their nation's history since the Iran-Iraq War. Reports emerged of dancing at funerals as resistance. Students held memorial ceremonies for killed classmates. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi addressed Khamenei directly, comparing him to Nazi criminals and promising a Nuremberg-style reckoning. Inside Iran, Iranians reportedly pleaded with Trump not to negotiate with the Islamic Republic after the massacres. The regime had reasserted control through brute force, internet blackout, and mass arrests. But the rial continued its collapse. International sanctions deepened daily, and the fundamental economic grievances that sparked the uprising remained entirely unaddressed by a government that increased security spending by 150% while offering wage increases worth barely 40% of inflation. As of this reporting, the USS Abraham Lincoln remains in the northern Arabian Sea. Destroyers continue patrolling the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. Fighter squadrons maintain combat readiness at forward bases in Jordan, Qatar, and potentially other locations not publicly disclosed. Missile defense systems stand guard across the Gulf. Surveillance flights maintain constant coverage. Nuclear talks have been agreed in principle, but no date for the next round has been set. And in the Iraqi provinces bordering Iran, in temporary bases that the Pentagon will neither confirm nor deny, there may or may not be operators from the most lethal special missions unit on Earth. Men who less than a month ago captured a president from his bedroom and who now sit within 450 kilometers of the supreme leader who ordered the massacre of his own people and whose nuclear ambitions have placed his country in the crosshairs of an American president who has already demonstrated that he considers no sovereign leader beyond the reach of American Special Operations Forces. The distance from Diyala province to Tehran is 450 kilometers. A Night Stalker MH-47 Chinook covers that distance in approximately 2 hours at cruise speed, less at maximum velocity. An F-35C Lightning II from the Abraham Lincoln covers it in minutes. A Tomahawk cruise missile from any of the destroyers in the Gulf covers it in under an hour. The infrastructure is in place. The forces are positioned. The diplomatic channel remains open but fragile, And the only thing separating the current standoff from the next chapter in this crisis is a decision that rests with a handful of individuals in Washington and Tehran who have already proven through massacres and missile strikes and midnight raids on presidential compounds exactly how far they are willing to go when they believe their survival or their legacy demands it. Every deployment eventually reaches its culmination point, the moment where military capability either translates into political outcome or returns to base, having served its purpose as coercive leverage. The question that will define the next weeks and months is whether Trump's Armada and his Tier 1 operators near Tehran will become the instrument of the most consequential American military operation since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, or whether they will serve as the most expensive poker bluff in the history of great power diplomacy. Either way, the men and women positioned across the Persian Gulf, in the skies above the Strait of Hormuz, and in the shadows along the Iraqi border are not bluffing about their capability. They are ready. They have always been ready. That is why they exist.